What's the most useless fact you know? The Spanish Empire never had a single colony. All of its territories were provinces and paid taxes to the Spanish crown. So the stolen gold from the South Americans is not true. That gold went into taxes for building a society in that province. Iron actually didn't burn as many witches as the other European countries during the medieval era. They made the witches pay fines or point out another 5 people that are suspicious for being a witch. Turns out that the entire of the villages were suspicious of being witches and never burned. An early cure for syphilis was to deliberately infect a patient with malaria. Malaria inflicts a high fever at onset, and a high fever is capable of killing syphilis. The patient will then use quinine to treat the malaria. Even if the treatment fails, and the malaria kills the patient, death over a night or two to a malaria fever is a cleaner death than letting the black lines slowly destroy the patient's body and mind. Prior to the discovery of penicillin, this procedure won the Nobel Prize in medicine. Your 30s and 40s are the only years, on average, where your heart beats regularly. Most people's hearts don't grow into a very regular steady rhythm until their early to mid-20s. Once you hit your 50s, most people commonly experience heart arrhythmias. Some are harmless. Out of an 80-year lifespan, you have maybe 25-35 years of a truly regular heart rate. FF7 had additional content aside from ruby and emerald. Diamond, not a boss fight in the OG Japanese version. Supernova, not percentile-based fine. Gravity elemental damage nor inflict status effects. Hades has some speech to a summoning background animation. The flashback of Zoc and Cloud en route to Midgar didn't exist. Killer whales are counted among the predators of the moose. Moose along coastal areas will dive down to 30 feet looking for vegetation, and the killer whales will pick them off. Also the California ground squirrels, when normal food supplies are low, will hunt and eat rattlesnake as they have developed an immunity to the venom. Barry Manilow doesn't use fade-outs in his songs. At some point when I was a kid in the 80s, my parents were watching 2020 or something like that, and they interviewed Barry Manilow. He said he hated fade-outs, so he doesn't use them. And that fact has been taking up space in my brain ever since then for some bizarre reason. My Uncle Dave can burp the British national anthem at full length with surprising musical accuracy, which he once proved on the stage at a pub in Manchester in the mid-90s whilst at university. This fact is entirely useless, and yet I have heard the story a few dozen times without ever actually witnessing the feat myself. The placenta is not formed by the mammalian mother's body. It's actually made up of fetal cells, and is our only temporary organ. During fetal development, it performs a vast array of physiological actions that are later taken over by separate organs, including the lungs, liver, gut, kidneys, and endocrine glands. If the Burj Khalifa 828 meters or half a mile tall was in Mexico City, which is 2,240 meters or 1.3 miles above sea level, the last floors of the building would need to have a pressurization system similar to airplanes because altitude sickness is a serious thing above 3,000 meters or 1.8 miles above sea level. Yeah, that's it. In the Addams Family TV show, the guy who played Lurch, Ted Cassidy, also played Thing. They didn't tell him which hand to use, so he changed back and forth to see if anybody would notice. Nobody did until after the series was over. When Lurch and Thing were in the same shot, a production assistant did the hand. Part of the electronics unit on Brunswick A1 pinsetting machines was something called a selenium rectifier. Why is this useless? Because the A1 has been obsolete for quite a few decades, and that particular component has been replaced with the superior silicon rectifier, which is not nearly as cool to say. The Ericsson phones in outdoor telephone booths in my home country in the 1980s had dial buttons made of soft plastic. Some kids burned them with lighters to get high from the burning fumes in the closed container of the booth, but didn't get the result they hoped for. They were just chasing an urban legend. The Federal Highway Administration has reserved the colors coral and light blue for use on road signs, but has no assigned category for them yet. Yellow signs are warning signs, orange are temporary signs, red signs are prohibitive regulatory signs, etc. Coral and light blue signs will be something. A palindrome is words spelled the same backwards and forwards, like level or kayak. An immordnalap is a word that spells one word forwards and a different word backwards, like stressed and desserts, or knob and bonk. Also, the words palindrome and immordnalap are immordnalaps of one another. Lines Paxton and Lance Hendrickson are the only actors to be killed by a Terminator, a xenomorph, and a predator. And I won $30 at a pub trivia night because I knew that. So it doesn't count anymore. Now, it's that the skin is the largest organ in the human body. The differences between AM for A3 and AM for Eta Sherman, and the differences between most the M16 and them for variants, and that the average PK of a AIM-70 Sparrow is 10%, or the fact that the F for Phantom's manual just tells you to eject if you have both engines fail. Maybe I'm just a nerd. You can use the word had 11 times in a row and remain grammatically correct. A teacher asks the students if had or had was appropriate in an example sentence. James, while Jimmy had a better effect on the teacher's score. The fact about people eating 7 spiders a year is a fake statistic made up to prove a point about how no one fact-checks their knowledge. It has instead become famous as the fact that the average human eats 7 spiders a year, thereby proving this point, kinda. There were actually a lot of lightsaber battles in the Star Wars prequels that were very well choreographed and also deliver a own character depth, but never made it into the movie. They are nutive, however, and it is kind of a crutch for fanfiction. The material on the moon's surface is called regolith, which is different from sol pedolith. Regolith has no water, air nor organic materials. Meanwhile, sol has 5 organic material, 45 inorganic material mineral, 20-30 water, and 20-30 air. Only one country in the entire world apart from China legally as a giant panda, as all giant pandas, even those born abroad, remain the legal property of China. The one exception is Mexico. Mexico legally owns a panda named Din Din. Can't and won't aren't just contractions. They are also archaic words. Can't is sanctimonious talk that is often hypocritical and of a moralizing nature. Want is one's accustomed behavior in a given situation. I like archaic words. The Canary Islands are named after dogs, aka canis, because, presumably, they look like sleeping dogs as they come over the horizon. Canaries, the bird, are so named because they originate from the Canary Islands. Chocolate and Hershey's ice cream, and completely unrelated to each other, despite both being founded in Lancaster County, PA, in the same year by men not related to each other with the surname Hershey. Light travels at 186,282.397 miles per second. I heard that on 60 Minutes. When I was 12, I'm 58 now. And it has stuck. So much so that when I hear someone say light travels at 186,000 nps, I want to scream. The secondary joystick on Prinoth and Pissenbilly Snowcats are analog joysticks from Nintendo. If you open up a joystick that has J on J and look at the secondary stick, you will find the Nintendo logo. Boris Yeltsin tried to order pizza, while blackout drunk during a state visit to the US. I may add that he was only in his underwear during the incident. Then the same thing happened the next day. The capital of Iceland is Reykjavik. I learned it from a Mad magazine making fun of the Trivial Pursuit game where they were making fun of useless facts. My spell checker doesn't even recognize it. That 2 members of Joe Division were questioned in the Yorkshire Ripper case as their tour schedule matched the movements of the killer, or something like that. The White Star Line tried to refute the lawsuits from the survivors and families of the Titanic under the stipulation that the ticket was one way to NY, and technically, I were in NY now. In 8th grade, I memorized pi to the 60th decimal place. I was trying for 100, but got bored and gave up. I'm now 40 and still have that burned into my memory to the 60th decimal place. My surname is almost identical to the name of some islands in the Caribbean, but unfortunately, I don't own them. The king owned them. Fuck my life. For example, Mark Canada. Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran uses Colgate toothpaste. Or he did when he gave an interview in 1984 or thereabouts. There must be something better I store in my brain than that. Willem Dafoe had a penis double in the movie Antichrist because the director Lars von Trier said Willem's Daffren was confusingly large and the audience would be frightened. The plastic tape on the end of a shoelace is called an aglet. This used to be a fun fact, but then Disney went and made sure everyone knew it, so yeah. Now it's double useless. How to spell a really long word on the back of a lot of shampoo bottles: methylchloroacetyl. Memorized it as a kid going to the bathroom before cell phones. Lol. Our eyes are shaped like cylinders instead of being round. This is why they cannot move their eyes in their sockets, and instead turn their head to position their gaze. A Nebuchadnezzar is a rather large wine bottle that holds 15 liters of wine, and is tremendously difficult to pour. A Balthazar only holds a paltry 12 liters. In 1992, Bill Clinton received 43 of the popular vote. G.H.W. Bush got 38. Ross Perot pulled 19, the most of any independent presidential candidate in history.